Hello everyone, first of all I want to say thank you very much for 100 subscribers, you're great, thanks for all the likes and comments you leave. I hope you're having fun following my channel, and because there's so many of us I decided to make a pretty special video for the occasion. This time I'm going to be ranking every single normal hero released in Lord of the Rings The Living Card Game. By normal, I mean I'm excluding saga heroes as they function pretty differently with their zero cost, making them impossible to put into the list, and I'm omitting Messenger of the King heroes, which might be a mistake, but I believe that this would kind of mess up the structure of the list I prepared, and 80% of the Messenger of the King heroes would just be sitting on the bottom of the list, making it a bit polluted. With that out of the way, how are we doing it? First of all, let's be honest here, it's impossible to rank all of the heroes in all situations. Even the worst heroes have the scenarios or decks in which they will have the job done, and sometimes the best heroes can be used in all the wrong ways. This list is supposed to be an indication on where the heroes rank, but it is not absolute, obviously, because I do not have access to data from tens of thousands of games to make sure about their win ratios. Also, what influences my ranking? It's the combination of power level, relevance in deck building, popularity, impact on the game, and the meta, their general usage against majority of scenarios, and how important they are in the decks they are in. Because of course you could build an overpowered deck with about any hero included, but that doesn't mean you will really utilize that hero. The quality is measured in the impact the hero has. Heroes that I have found to have positive win ratio will obviously end up higher on the list. How will the ranking be done? The whole ranking is split into 6 tiers of power, from lowest to higher: E, D, C, B, A and S. And the sub-tiers like B+. Many of you are probably already familiar with the concept of tier lists. The higher in the tier, the better, but you could make the case for some moving around in the tiers. With 103 heroes at our disposal, the difference in relevance between them will be so abysmally minimal that it's really hard to make the case for either. I tried my best sorting them from 103 to number 1. I will try to say a word or two about every hero on the list, but it will be impossible to elaborate on every choice. I'm going to elaborate mostly on the lowest and the highest ranked heroes. With the explanations out of the way, let's go straight into tier E, the worst heroes in the game. Tier E consists of just 4 heroes: Bombur, Dory, Fatty Bolger and Nasia. Bombur, ranked at number 103, turns out to be actually the worst hero in the game as it is, which might come as an offense to all of you Bombur lovers and defenders who I know exist. He anti-synergizes with the archetype he's meant to support, Dwarf Swarm. The Swarm needs to have the tools to bring as many characters into play as fast as possible, and if you don't have it covered by the second end phase, you're doing something wrong, and Bombur gives you slight early game boost, triggering Dory and such, but if you're triggering 2 heroes of it, you're not running Dane, which unless you're in multiplayer means you're just crippling yourself. And after you pass the 5 dwarfs threshold anyway, you're left with a pile of very uninspiring stats. Which you just paid 10 Fred for. Let him rest in your binder, he was never meant to be. At number 102, here is Dory. He shares some similarities with Bombur, having a very bad stat line, but he can support a better defender like Baragon, Elroh here, or Erican Brand during big boss battles like Lake Town, giving him an actual proper use in few out of 160 scenarios in the game. At number 101, there's Fatty Bolger. His Hobbit trait is the only saving grace, allowing you to equip a Hobbit pipe on him. He anti-synergizes with the whole archetype and brings a lot of threat upon you just to do what many heroes do better than him. At number 100 we have Nasia. She's a victim of Gondorian fire and Blood of Numenor existing, and her basically requiring Steward of Gondor for herself, which is already a huge price when you can't use that resources to pay for allies. Her drawback does not help her, and with Steward, Fire and Blood, you will just turn about any hero into a superior version of her, securing her low spot on the list. She has some places, but she will always be inferior to alternative fighters. And we're off to tier D, starting out at number 99 with Spirit Pippin, he's more salvageable than Fatty, but his lore version is arguably the best Hobbit hero around, making you question your choices when you go with Spirit version. At number 98, Dwalin. There are better ways to reduce your threat and there are better ways to kill orcs, but if you're in very weird spot where you want to do both, he might be useful. 97, Talin. He's a very fun hero to build around, but direct damage is still very gimmicky compared to conventional combat, and a lot has to happen for it to work. Also, his stats work against him. 96, Brand Son of Bane. His leadership version is splendid, and this one at least has some solid stats, but his ability is super conditional, readying characters so late in the turn it might not be relevant at all. 95, Doon here. He has a solid premise, but does not work in multiplayer at all, unless you're very organized. He requires immense setup for okayish payoff, and there are two heroes doing same as him but better, Haldir and Leadership Eomer. At 94, Balin. He has a pretty unique ability to cancel shadow effects, but he's very inefficient and random. Committing a whole hero spot for this ability might not be the best idea. 93, Lor Glorfindle is playable just for his stats alone and access to Asphalot, but his ability is a big inefficient joke. 92, Tactics Quick Beam is interesting, he has a great stat line, but he hardly fits into any existing deck, and building one around him just makes his tempo advantage diminish, making him pretty awkward to play. And 91 is Smeagol. He's great when he works, there are also builds that keep him as an enemy, but giving encounter deck more ways to bite you just isn't always the smartest idea. Losing his resource when you can't kill him is devastating. At number 90 we have Denethor, and with his leadership version being so good and Messenger of the King Furial existing, he could as well have been deleted from the game, even if he's not that terrible. At number 89 we have Lor Bilbo. He's fun but overcosted for no real reason, and other lore hobbits outshine him. 88, Lor Faramir requires a ton of setup for sadly underwhelming payoff. He's fun though. At 87, Tactics Bilbo is a bit better than his lore version and is in Sphere with Sting, but his impact is still minimal. 86, Spirit Aragorn, from my limited testing, is very underwhelming. His ability is simply too slow, and the only thing going for him is his name, making him a viable user of many attachments. The single most disappointing hero in the game, in my opinion. 85, Spirit Mary ain't bad and is a good candidate for all Spirit Hobbit decks, but he's just a small piece of the puzzle and usually just mildly supports his deck that could very well live without him. 84, Elf Helm promises you a lot of buffs if you commit to the mounts, but because most mounts are a bit underpowered, the buffs don't really make up for you filling a big part of the deck with them. 83, Tom Cotton is a bit too squishy for a defender, and his ability requiring you to keep an enemy engaged is pretty annoying for Hobbit decks, and you will have trouble handling two enemies at the same time. 82, Oin. He can make for a solid glue hero in a dwarf deck, but usually you just don't need him if you build right. 81, Eleanor is a hero that's something of as an holy grail, but requiring exhaust and revealing another card is not going to cut it in harder quests, where you need every stat and all encounter cards are terrible in some way. The easier the quest, the better she is, which is not very compelling. 80. Mirlander has some mono-lore secrecy potential, but it's usually not worth exploring aside from fringe cases. 79. Leadership Harami is very basic, he pulls off what he's supposed to, but his stat line is awkward and you won't always pull him off. And 78, Haldan is just there to support his better brother and offers some basic combat potential, but you will just need to put a lot into him to make him worth it. At C+, we have heroes that are pretty solid with some flaws holding them back a little bit. 77, Erican Brand is a defender with shadow cancelling built in, but he self-damages and is a bit squishy, so you need to build around him, and Burning Brand exists. 76, Argalad is great with weapons, so he forces you into tactics lore pretty much, where you will lack action advantage to properly utilize his attack. 75, Leadership Imrahil is pretty boring but workable, a single ready around with a condition understandable, simply okay. 74 Tactics Theoden is pretty exciting with all his tools, but he runs a bit counter to what a mono tactics would want to do. Still very efficient. 73 Rosiel with her stats buffed will be very efficient, but unless you have good action advantage, you might have benefited more from a working quester or a defender right off the bat. 72 Theodred gives you resources, which is always great. He's cheap, but his stats are all over the place. At 71 Halbarat has a small ability to make advantage of, has some action advantage built in, and very average stats, making him an average hero to use. At 70 Mablung has exactly the same average stats, but with resource acceleration in tactics makes up for the stats a little bit. At 69, Haldan has good stats and top tier abilities and would be way higher if not for his archetype just not being the strongest right now. The B tier is where the majority of the game's heroes lie. This is the average tier where all characters are pretty good even if they have a flaw or two or lack some extra oomph. Because this is the largest tier and characters here are very similar power level wise, in my opinion I will go over this one a bit quicker than the other ones, so the length of this video is a bit more bearable. So, the bottom two spots are occupied by tactics dwarf fighters, with Gimli having a bit of an edge due to his crazy late game potential and hit points. At 66 we have Eomer, who has gained new life with the free hunters contract and just does Doon here's job way better. Treebeard has stats so insane he just has to be here even if he's a little lackluster. Before is a good little resource smoothing machine, and Bard the Bowman is a good multiplayer DPS. It's just a shame he lacks the Dale trait. Tactics Eomer can attack for 7 pretty easily if you build around him just for a bit, so he kind of beats Gimli at his job. Legolas is a great multi-purpose multiplayer shooter. Fast Red is an interesting combo of defending and reducing threat, and he works great with Eomer I showcased earlier. Haldir of Lorien requires some shenanigans and weapons, but killing an enemy before they attack is surely nothing to be scoffed at. Idren is very simple, but has a good combination of traits, has a lot of attack for spirit, and has a trigger you don't need to build around for. Bjorn is a beast for early game, but you need to have a plan to substitute his defending prowess later in the game. Leadership Gimli is very solid with extra action advantage and attack buff for Legolas. Sadly, his stats are not that fitting. Leadership Frodo also presents us with action advantage for resources, but this time it's less conditional and reduces threat as well. Kaliel gives you some workaround to Harad's problem of extra unique characters clogging up your hand, and has some good resource smoothing. Theoden is awesome with the cost reduction, but sadly Rohan is just not the greatest right now, which is why he's here. Thranduil offers you a lot. He offers you a great focus defender stat line, resource smoothing, and an ability to interfere in combat on demand with new allies with extra knowledge of the situation. Turindir is living new life right now with Council of the Wise decks, but even outside them, the ability to tutor at the start of the game is something pretty unique. Spirit Legolas again offers action advantage on other heroes, but in Spirit this time, so this is the Sphere with Elven Light and at the cost of discarding a card. Gildor Inglorian is pretty new, but his leadership is best way to draw cards right now, and with free willpower he is pulling his weight. Hama before Errata would be even higher, but this one is still fine, allowing tactics to either get more card draw or more combat tricks. Galder of the Heavens allows you to craft some insane hands and combos pretty well with Noldor archetype, although he has some strong competition. Leadership Aragorn is in the sphere with most of his toys, including Sword that was broken, and he has very solid stats, even if his ability is just okay. Spirit Frodo has a very unique ability that allows you to soak up some surprise damage, which is just very impactful, and can save a lot of games. Grima is a bit solo oriented, but he's Lor's best way to generate resources, with keys to Orthanc. Thorin Oakenshield is pretty expensive, but in Dwarven Swarm, resources are what keeps you going and are everything, so you can't go wrong with him. And Hirgon is another resource generator. With a bonus, you will play your tactics allies after you reveal the encounter cards, giving you some extra knowledge. and he combines exceptionally well with Eagles. We now move on to the B+ tier, which contains heroes that have almost gotten into tier A, but competition was simply too hard for them to beat. At 41 we have Ori, which is a very valid choice for a lore hero in Dwarf Swarm, as he basically provides you with an extra card every turn, giving you even more chances to get your allies. At 40 there's Lanwin, which is both a great choice for a third hero in a Dale deck or in huge multiplayer, while the surge will trigger multiple times. Ranged further solidifies her as a good multiplayer hero. 39, Gway here, while a bit disappointing initially, performs pretty well in testing, and while you really need to commit to him in the deck building phase, his stats and keywords are really valuable. He's worth trying out in my opinion. At 38 we have Caldara, which still has a top tier deck existing with her, but Errata nerfed her considerably. Still, if you're willing to build around her, which is usually pretty restricting, she has some power to offer. At 37, Tactics Aragorn has two small impact abilities, but ones that you can really utilize in different ways to fuel your Dunedain synergy. A very good fighter hero. At 36, Saruman is a bit of a challenge to build right, but when you do, you're sure to get some explosive turns. The only way to build good doomed decks is right here. At 35, Beravor is an old but tested solution to draw cards. 2 around, even at the cost of an action, will always be a golden standard. Then we have Círdan the Shipwright, which is one of the only heroes with 4 willpower and fuels your discard Noldor synergies, one of the better choices in Noldor decks. And at 33, Leadership Boromir is not perfect by any means, but with Visionary Leadership he becomes a Dane for Gondor that can quest or attack himself, which is a good place to be, considering how strong Gondor is right now. And at 32, Celeborn is a centerpiece of the Sylvan's archetype and holds them together very well, one of the better trade boosters right now. This is the A tier. We're now getting into the top heroes, the ones that have clearly proven their place in the card pool and their relevance. At 31, Tactics Boromir is still a powerhouse. Free raiding helps against majority of the quests, and with some support he can easily become the best fighter on the field. Also, he has 3 relevant traits, which does help. At 30, Radagast is the best hero to play with eagles and other creatures. With his stuff he covers action advantage, resource generation and smoothing, making him a great versatile hero. At 29 you might be a little bit surprised to see Elrond here so high on the list, but his ability has no restrictions on the defense, meaning that with a proper build you will be defending the whole board no problems. You won't always get there, but his potential is so insane it's hard to stress out. At 28, Erwin is the queen of efficiency, 4 willpower, and if you have a card clogging up your hand, you can discard it for a minor benefit. This simple, elegant efficiency is enough to secure her a spot in the A tier. At 27, Damrod is surprisingly strong, low cost, generates resources and draws cards all at once in a pretty solid archetype. He does it all. At 26, Tactics Imrahil is a very creative hero that offers a lot of possibilities, but the sheer fact that this guy can basically always summon an ally to block with 1 resource, which is pretty much equivalent to playing a feint, is enough to put him here on the list. He opens up a ton of combos. 25, Merry is crazy in all Hobbit decks, and anyone who played him must agree with that. This match attack for this low is impossible to beat. At 24, Spirit Dane Ironfoot is the best defender in the game right out of the gate, but at a price of constantly thinning your deck. This price, however, can actually help you trigger Dwarven mining synergies, making him the second best spirit defender in the game. At 23, Amarfield is a great package of abilities for Dunedain decks. Its extra resources, good combat stats and access to tactics and leadership at once all unlock a lot of synergies, even if this hero is a bit squishy. At 22 is Folko Boffin. I really did not want him that high on the list, but I guess he just deserves it. If you want to either be playing a 2-hero deck or you want a very cheap hobbit with good stats for the cost, this is the guy you will be picking, even if he's not terribly exciting. That's a free threat at setup. At 21, Grimbeorn the Old is one of the best multi-purpose fighters in the game. He takes very little to get going and his ability to fight back will stop a lot of nasty enemy abilities. At 20, Tactics Baragon has a pretty irrelevant ability to reduce the cost of armor and weapons you play on him, but you pick him for 4 defense and sentinel. It doesn't get more solid than this in the defense department, and you want it or not, when you need the defender, this should be one of your first choices. At 19 we have Leadership Sam, and he carries the Hobbit decks pretty hard, and even outside them, free willpower for 8 in Leadership is a good deal. His ability does not have a limit too, leaving you a ton of possibilities for shenanigans. At number 18 we have Pippin. Drawing cards is one of the best things you can do, and he does it so well in a Hobbit deck, because he also allows you to pace the engagements way better. At 17, Nori is the only hero that allows threat reduction to such a ridiculous extent in theory, making him the best Dwarven Spirit hero available. And at 16, Brand Son of Bane is worth it both in and outside of a Dale deck. He turns attachments on allies into a reliable strategy and allows you to splash attachments from all spheres. His stats may be bad, but his abilities are so good it does not hold him back. We are nearing the top of the list with A+ tier. Those heroes are elites of the elite and all excel at something in the game. At number 15, Spirit Aragorn is the best usual defender the game has to offer. He combines defending, which he has incredible stats for, with threat reduction, allowing you to pace yourself in combat even better. The ability doesn't seem like much, but it can allow you to maintain your threat level, and he's a very formidable defender, even more so when you load him up, even with a single Gondorian shield. Leadership Dane is, for some players, the face of the game, and one of the first powerhouses released. I would love for him to be higher, but all the nerfs crippled the dwarf's archetype considerably, and while he remains insane, the other dwarf cards would just be plain bad without him. At number 13, Glorfindle, on the other hand, is a pretty fresh face, but she made quite a splash. She has a modern, hyper-efficient stat line and a very tempo-oriented ability that allows you to pull allies for free in and out of play for questing at a cost of a card in your hand. With some card draw, she can recycle many powerful allies a lot of time and quest for very high amounts without much setup, making her one of the best spirit heroes up to date. Eerie Star is one of those heroes that completely change up the gameplay. Still incredibly popular in all of the combo decks and swarm decks, he made a name for himself, and the game wouldn't look the way it does right now without him. With him you don't need to worry for card draw ever again, make him for some interesting deck building options, one of the wildest heroes up to date. At number 11, Brand is very reminiscent of Dane Ironfoot, but for Dale faction, and probably better in the right deck. Providing you with all the card draw you will need and a global willpower boost, he allows the best trait deck up to date to exist, the Dale deck. He glues the archetype perfectly with his son and brings a lot of other trait leaders to shame. At number 10, Spirit Glorfindle, the man, the myth, the legend, 5-threat hero with a negligible drawback, was always going to be insane and relevant. And he still is. He slots pretty much anywhere, brings his toys with him and makes everything better. Sometimes you don't need flashy abilities, you just need a pile of stats that costs 5 threat and allows you to stay in secrecy at the start of the game. At number 9, Hero in the Fair is a hero hated by some for what he represents, the Outlands archetype, often called boring or uninspired. I don't really share that opinion and I like it for what it is, but I must agree it is very strong for an archetype that basically happened in a single adventure pack pretty randomly. He's one of the best leadership heroes in the game, if you bring his Outland package with him. At number 8, Hero Gandalf. He makes pretty much anything fun. With the added knowledge of the top of the deck, the ability to play it regardless of sphere, he gives you some insane card advantage while also allowing you to use his exclusive cards, which are all very valuable and neutral, making him very splashable, regardless of his high cost. His only problem is the clashing with the ally version. Also, his stats are some of the best all around, so he will excel at everything. At number 7, Galadriel Hero. She is not as flashy as Gandalf is, but she fills a lot of functions other heroes simply can't do. Allies do not have to exhaust to quest the round they enter play with her, making her an instant slot in a Sylvan deck, but pretty much any ally heavy deck with her will get a ton of action advantage with that. Her second ability is both threat reduction and card draw, which is some great support ability to have, but her real ability is in her tools, Mirror of Galadriel and Nasia. Mirror is the only repeatable tutor in the game, so in any combo heavy deck, she makes for an incredible fit. This is the S tier. Those heroes are, in my opinion, the very best Lord of the Rings The Living card game can offer. All of those are game changers and powerhouses like none other. At number 6, we start with Glowin, a core set leadership hero that stood the test of time. He's incredibly overpowered, and with Elrond's Song of Healing and Elven Light, and probably some extra hit points, or even with the old combo of Warden of Healing and Song of Wisdom, you can tank virtually infinite damage. And if that's not impressive, I don't know what is. At number 5, Arwen Undomiual is the simplest hero in the S tier and the least flashy one, but she's one of the most popular spirit heroes for a reason. She allows you to splash spirit into pretty much any deck with her lowish threat. She brings free willpower with her and a very useful ability to discard a card at any time to get a resource. With Elven Light, she will always get you either a resource for a card or a card for a resource, meaning that she will fix whatever you're currently lacking in your economy. With discard pile synergies, she's pretty absurd, and she also smooths your resources very well in a dedicated deck. At number 4, Leadership Denethor is something you will not understand until you try it. 2 extra resources at the start is all you need to build an explosive start like none other. He comes in clutch in all the nightmare scenarios, which require you to be at the top of your game from the very start, and he has a very useful ability of smoothing resources in a Gondor deck. All in all, he's the best leadership hero in the game, providing what leadership should. A simple resource boost. Lor Aragorn is a very unique hero, well deserving of number 3. The ability to go back to the initial threat warps the way you play the game in a way not many heroes do. He either allows you to focus on doomed and threat increasing shenanigans and go back after, or to stop worrying about threat completely, as a mechanic. Because of the way he alters the game and his obvious power, he's here at number 3. The runner-up for the top spot is Tactics Erwin. She's one of those heroes who are strong with no support whatsoever. It's 4 willpower in tactics for 6 initial threat, which is just insane, and I can't stress out how valuable her second ability is. Just being able to take most boss enemies with her at demand is so broken, even if it's once per game. She will take the pressure off your back by getting rid of the biggest enemy you encounter early in the game and allow you to build yourself up. Is the absolute top power level wise, and she's useful in pretty much any deck that will take her. And finally, at number 1 we obviously have Elrond. There is no running away from the fact that this hero is the absolute best of the best, with him enabling you to play any allies you want and boosting all healing sources on the board. He would already be very solid, but you also get his incredible stat line and a card to rule all cards, Vilya. Vilya is the ultimate broken engine that can generate up to 6 resources around and getting you a card from the top of your deck played. With a little setup, you will just overwhelm the encounter with an economy that cannot be beaten. Elrond is an absolute king. and I just do not see any other card overshadowing him, pretty much ever. So, that would be all. This was the most insane project I've done so far for the channel, but I believe the occasion being the 100 subscriber special demanded something actually special. So I hope you enjoyed my rankings, but I'm curious on what you think about the ranking. Who would you place higher? Who do you think is overrated? Give me your opinions and look forward to the future of this channel. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next one.